Couple seconds here.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the YouTube channel Drew Dat. We were going to attempt to do this live, but given how live streaming on the other channel has been spotty as hell lately, we decided to pre-record this as a podcast instead. So welcome to the first episode of the Drew Dat podcast here on the Drew Dat YouTube channel. For the first time on the first episode, my brother Desertnord is joining us.
Hey there.
I should probably only call you that on the gaming podcast and not this one, right? Because that's your gamer tag.
It's okay. You can call me that anywhere.
Okay, well, Desertnord then. I'm Drew, obviously, since the channels are named after me. Here on this podcast, it's about all kinds of shit except for video games, like you see behind me. So on today's show, we're going to talk about an ancient temple. Where the hell is this thing located again?
It's in the southeastern portion of Turkey.
Okay, it's in Turkey. It's called, why don't you say it? Because you say it better than I do.
Gobekli Tepe.
Okay. And then various things that we know about that. We're also going to cover our favorite adult beverages. Just because I was looking for something to talk about on this particular podcast. And finally, the state of Star Wars, and specifically information about the upcoming The High Republic by Disney and Lucasfilm. So, let's get right into talking about the temple.
Yep.
Well, since you know more about it than me, you might as well kick us off for it.
Yeah, so the whole story of the Gobekli Tepe location started back in the early 60s when a couple of archaeologists who were doing normal Byzantine era archaeology stumbled across the location, and they discovered these stones sticking out of the ground, and they were like, that's kind of odd. And so they dug a little bit, and they were like, let's try and date this the best we can. We don't really have permission to go too deep or do too much excavating or anything. So we'll just, draw our conclusion, which their conclusion was completely false. Their conclusion they drew was that the location was a Byzantine cemetery.
Yeah.
Because all they found was the tops of the stones. That's all they could uncover. And they assumed the stones were just like blank markers for graves, dating back to the Byzantine Empire. But later on, the German Institute, the German Archaeological Institute, in the 1980s, and then back in the 90s, they really revved up work there, discovered that these stone, what were previously thought were headstone, basically, were incredibly deep and incredibly large, and they had only scratched the very, very surface of what this really was. And so Hans Schmidt, for instance, the lead archaeologist on that expedition in 1994, made the conclusion that no, this is something far older. This is a complex. They found dozens, and in fact now they know that only about 5% of the site has been excavated. It's that fucking huge. But these pillars they date back 12,000 years.
Yeah.
At least the ones that have been uncovered and dated.
Yeah, and I believe it was buried too.
Sure,
right?
Yes.
Which, as far as I'm aware, is like in theory or something like that, supposed to have been because of like an asteroid impact or several.
Well, the whole story relates to that, but it kind of leads into a whole nother discussion of a whole bunch of other details that kind of come before it. The reason for the burying was deliberate. It wasn't actually done by anything natural, because they noticed that the burial job was of all soil dating back to the same period. And it wasn't volcanic, it wasn't from a flood, it wasn't a deposit. It was burial by architects. It was burial by like the way we bury our dead. it was very strange that they had come to this conclusion, but that's what it is. That about 10,000 years ago, it was buried on purpose for whatever reason. The whole site.
I can think of a few things that I'd like to bury on purpose, but those things should be mentioned for the other podcast, though.
Sure.
Oh, and
it'd be like if one of these days we decide we're just gonna bury Kansas City, you know, and abandon it.
Why would we want to bury Kansas City?
I'm just saying, for instance.
Shouldn't we bury, I don't know, Washington?
No, I know. It's very odd. And this place would have been absolutely magnificent at its, height. It would have been the absolute gem of the entire world in terms of architecture and in terms of infrastructure, because they've determined that they had, Neolithic, it was a Neolithic period, which means that everyone else on the planet, as far as anyone can tell, was hunter-gatherers and was, living in huts and living in caves and not having any higher culture whatsoever. Meanwhile, the people at Gobekli Tepe were enjoying the agriculture and religion and temple culture and maybe even politics. Very, very out of place this whole thing is.
Does this temple potentially go back to when mammoths were still walking the face of the earth?
Well, not particularly. I mean, the mammoths, the megafauna of the North American continent, for instance, died off in the event that came prior to this site being built.
Fair enough.
12,850 years ago, just about, was what's called the Younger Dryas Impact Event, where right in the middle of an ice age, which is what the Earth was in at that point, you had the string of 8 cometary pieces come streaming in and smash into at least 8 different locations across the North American and European continent and cause just absolute cataclysm across the planet. It caused a verified meltwater pulse in both the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans, which would have flooded out God knows how many different. It would have flooded out any coastal anything that existed, whether it be a city, settlement, people, whatever. And it would have flooded out the whole North American continent and would have flattened any culture or any people or any structures that were there at the time on the North American continent. But it also had a trail of pieces that impacted zones all the way from Western Turkey all the way back to off the California coast, all the way across that whole stretch of the Earth.
But back to
several of these pieces, no doubt, would have landed in the ocean. Yeah. Which, as you know, any kind of impactor like that landing in the ocean is a catastrophe.
Certainly is.
But it was a string of them, much like you saw in 1994 with Shoemaker Levy 9 hitting Jupiter. This would have been, each one of these would have been enough to devastate civilization, any civilization that might have existed at the time.
Yeah, but back to the temple and...
Yeah. And the temple was built on the heels of that event.
Yeah.
In the archaeological record, as soon as that event after the second meltwater pulse happened and temperatures went back up, suddenly, archaeologically, this springs up, this temple complex in eastern Turkey. It suddenly springs up. And you wonder, how the hell did anyone possess the knowledge and ability to build this at that period? And the only cogent theory I've ever come across was that these people were refugees from whatever civilization existed when that event happened. meaning they already had agriculture, they already had construction ability, they already had temple culture, they already had myths and gods and legends and stories, and a culture all unto their own. And they just didn't have a place, and they built the place to start again.
Yeah.
And so that's what this appears to have been. The place that culture started again after that event.
And we have no way of knowing, like, what kind of religious temple, if that's what this place is, what it might have been.
Yeah, it appears to be very pagan in nature, if anything.
Especially with some of, like, the artifacts and statues that get pulled, that have been pulled from it. Like, and one thing that I was watching, they were pointing out one statue which was clearly of a male effigy that has an erect penis.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, believe me, ancient cultures would have had no modern sensibilities of, sexual taboo of any kind.
Well, well, obviously.
But the amazing thing is that whoever these people were, somehow in a period when the rest of the population of the planet appears to have been, carving spears and hunting mammoths, these people were building, art and building, pillars that weigh up to 90 tons and building infrastructure and planting crops and doing farm science and writing things down and carving animal depictions on their walls, of their temple here.
Mm-hmm.
It's just it explodes the modern historical narrative quite badly. It blows it sky high, frankly.
Like an asteroid impact.
Yeah, to say that the Egyptian culture was the first culture of mankind, I mean, we had already known from previous adventure that that was not true, and that the Phoenicians predate them anyway. But prior to the Phoenicians, you had these people, whoever they were.
And we don't even know who they were, do we?
No. It's complete conjecture. They apparently left there's no books that we've so yet found. But again, only 5% of the site has been excavated. So maybe in the rest of the 95%, maybe there's ancient texts. Maybe there's something left to be found.
Who knows?
But this is the most intriguing case that I could bring up probably about, a lost civilization that is absolutely 1,000% legit in terms of blowing the mainstream narrative sky high.
I think that this has been a good segment for the new channel and the new podcast. I think every week we should have like one history-based topic for every show, I think.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So next week, maybe the comparison between ancient Rome and our own situation here in the modern times. That ought to be interesting to look at.
All of Western culture leads back to Rome.
Yeah, but in comparison,
Greece from there.
But in comparison, the fall of Rome maybe to where we're currently at in the United States, maybe.
Oh yeah.
Because I see a lot of comparisons to how Rome fell to the current unrest here.
Oh yeah, yeah.
A lot of comparisons. So with that, are you comfortable with moving on to another topic on the show, or do you want to keep going about?
No, it's okay. We can move on to the next topic.
All right. Next up, our favorite adult beverages, whatever they might be. Bro, you and I have a history of enjoying some Captain Morgan Spice rum in the past.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Captain Black is my absolute favorite.
When it comes to anything that you would mix like in pop or tea or anything, just open up a bottle and just dump it in. It doesn't really matter that much to me anymore, as long as it's not Fireball or anything like really exotic like that.
Yeah, in the category of liquor, it's blackstrap rum definitely tops the list for me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
However, more times than not, I find myself just drinking a beer instead lately.
Yeah, and I was about to say in the beer category, I actually like Guinness probably the best.
My personal favorite is Coors Light, but really any light beer, I'll just crack it open and drink it.
Yeah.
But then again, I also don't mind Samuel Adams either, so and that's not really a light beer, I think.
Yeah, I think if you ever try a dark Guinness, you'll love it.
Maybe if I find some, I might pick it up and see what happens. But I still also wouldn't mind picking up some Corona at this rate. For obvious reasons that
Corona's a good
I'm
cold
not going to
beer,
put
but
out. Yeah.
I mean, well, they all are good cold, but you get what I mean. It's not good if it's not cold, is what I'm
saying. Did you really have to say it?
I guess not.
Yeah.
Sort of goes without saying, perhaps.
Yeah. So, and speaking of reasons to drink, the next segment, the state of Star Wars.
Yep.
But first, before we actually talk about the state of Star Wars, there's some bullet points here. First, the High Republic seems like it is going to be a disaster because Kathleen Kennedy's version of what she would want. Obviously, on their marker board, they had like all these things listed, and diversity being like at the top of the list, basically. Here we go.
Oh yeah.
And there was something online talking about the general premise of it, with Kennedy's version, that being the Jedi being needed by the Republic to stop like a disaster of some kind, right? But here's the disaster in this article. A ship gets destroyed while in hyperspace, and because it got destroyed while in hyperspace, its wreckage and its cargo then turn into hyperspace missiles, and the Jedi have to stop that from being a disaster, because apparently now, if a ship gets destroyed in hyperspace, it's no longer just destroyed. It's like wreckage could now just randomly ram into shit in the universe now.
Sure.
So not only does Lucasfilm under Kathleen Kennedy not give a shit about Star Wars lore from the original trilogy or the prequels, they don't even care about the lore that they had in their own fucking shit.
Well, sure, it's catastrophically schizophrenic because it's not based on logic, it's based on emotion. I mean, I wouldn't have surprised me if the opening scroll of any new movie they try to make would be like, you know, the last straight white male is discovered and he must be hunted down, you know, that type of shit.
So yeah.
But then again, they might be trolling themselves at that point.
And Kathleen Kennedy's characters for it basically seem to me like cancel culture just run amok, like we're constantly seeing all around us, right now. Because you can't go on Twitter without seeing someone getting fucking canceled now.
Dream as far as writing goes.
Yeah. However,
the rest of us, it's like, what in the bleep are you even talking about?
So yeah. So if Disney had continued down this path with this, you're looking at a flat-out, full-blown fucking disaster, and nobody would go see this shit. But, as I pointed out to you before we started filming here, excuse me, a report coming across my desk from Mike Zero on YouTube, just a little bit before you even called me. George Lucas is now reported to have a major role in this particular thing called the High Republic. From a creative standpoint, and apparently, according to Mike Zero, George Lucas is changing basically everything.
Yeah, well, good for George, because George hasn't had his way with the Star Wars film since Revenge of the Sith. So, I mean, like, they literally brought him in for advisement and then literally took everything he might have told them and told him to shove it up his ass.
Yeah, but now George and, what's his face? Why can I never remember the man's name whenever I'm on camera? But I can wander around my house off camera saying it constantly. He's basically been the creative mind behind The Mandalorian.
You mean Jon Favreau?
Jon Favreau, yeah.
Yeah.
Apparently, he's also going to be in charge of this thing too now.
Sure, and thank God, because both of those men know what they're doing.
Yeah.
But everyone else who's touched this shit has fucked it up.
And Jon goes on record all the time going, the fans want to see this. We should do it.
Yeah, is it really so fucking hard to give the fans what they want? I mean, really? Why would you not want to do that? I don't get it. I still don't get it.
Why would you not want people in the
fans what they want?
Why would you not want people in the theaters, assuming we can have those back again in my lifetime?
No, they're up there trying to make movies to change the audience and make the audience think differently. It's like, what does that got to do with Star Wars? Go make that movie yourself. Go make your own fucking story if you're trying to change people's minds.
Don't worry, Disney. You're changing the audience, all right? You're changing them from Star Wars fans in seats to empty seats.
Yeah.
Because you're not getting the audience.
People couldn't even argue that the Rise of Skywalker was any fucking good. Even they were like, this is stupid and pointless. What the fuck? Because
you're damn sure not getting the target audience to stay in the seats, which is, a certain group of people that I'm no longer going to reference in any video or stream, because I'm not going to give them the time of day anymore. But you know who I'm talking about.
Sure.
It's the kind of people that are currently on Twitter trying to cancel everything 6 ways to Sunday.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the Twitter mob.
That's the other word for them.
Yeah.
But either way,
the Alphabet Mafia.
Yeah, I suppose that works. But either way, that's all I really have. Do you have anything else for this particular first episode of Drew That Pod?
Yeah, the only thing I was going to say about Star Wars is that I'm very happy that the cat has come out of the bag in regards to how George Lucas really feels about Disney Star Wars.
Well, he was kind of already going in that direction, like even before the sequel trilogy was even done. When he called, when he said in one interview, famously, that he feels like he sold his children, Star Wars, to white slavers in Disney.
Yeah, sure, but he said that before they really did all the fucking up. I'm talking about him basically between friends saying he can't stand The Last Jedi or really much of any of this new trilogy.
Who can?
No, I know, but obviously the people who wrote it, like Ryan Johnson and all the, doorknobs that follow him on Twitter and lick his fucking dribble, all of them, they love it. They think it's great. They think it's the best Star Wars ever made.
Yeah.
And they're delusional by pretty much anybody's standard.
Indeed. So, where do you see Star Wars going from here at this point? Because this segment is called The State of Star Wars.
By the fans. Because, obviously the woke crowd doesn't give a shit about Star Wars. They never did. They just were trying to use it as an activist platform to try and get eyeballs on their agenda. That's all they ever wanted it for. And now that all the fucking eyeballs are turned away and everybody's poo-pooing it and saying it's shit, even the fans are turned away. Now it's going to have to be on fans to revive the shit because, and that's true of a lot of OPs, a lot of properties.
Yeah, that's the case with Ghostbusters at this point, too.
Oh, yeah, Ghostbusters, Terminator. They fucked up a lot.
All I can say is that Disney needs to be careful with the MCU right now.
Oh yeah. Well, you know what they're trying to do. See, people are seeing it coming though, with the whole Love and Thunder and trying to make every one of these titles like WandaVision and the Immortals, or I think it's called Immortals. Or am I wrong on that word? It's not Immortals. It's something else.
Yeah, I can't think of it right now.
But anyway, they're trying to make that an all-female cast, and I'm just like, what is this shit?
But for all I know, it, it, it might very well be Immortals, like you were saying, for all we know.
Yeah, it's something like that. I'm trying to remember the word, but no, Eternals. That's what it's called.
Eternals. Yeah.
Yeah.
You weren't too far away.
Yeah, Immortals was a good movie by Henry Cavill back in 2000. I think it was 9 or something. That's a good movie.
I wish I could have a time machine and go back to that.
It's gonna be woke shit if it even gets made.
I wish I could have a time machine and go back to 1999.
Yeah.
At this point. And then right before 9/11 happens, hop back in and like skip ahead a couple years.
Oh yeah, well I'd probably pay anything for an alternate timeline.
or better, yeah, go into the future to see if this ends at any point, and if it does, maybe just stay there.
Yeah, I would just want to live in an alternate timeline, maybe.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying this timeline isn't like fucking lit. Obviously, it's lit, but I don't want it to be lit like this.
To translate for the parents that may watch this in the future, translate. What do you mean when you say lit?
I mean, full of chaos and catastrophe.
Oh,
and
okay.
events.
So like everybody's been drinking.
In this context, lit means crazy.
Okay, because I've heard people say lit as in like awesome.
Oh yeah, well it can mean that.
In my world, lit means you've been drinking too much.
Sure.
But either way. So Star Wars looks like it may be going in a good direction at some point in the near future.
Yeah, to see George and John involved is really nice.
Yeah, assuming that
they need to be given full control.
Yeah.
JK needs to go out the door or the window. I don't care which.
Assuming that our world can finally go back to what passed as normal before all of this corona shit.
Yeah.
But we'll see what happens. Hopefully 2021 will wind up being better than this. And I have a feeling that and I do want to at this point do a year-end review for both general shit here on this channel as well as on the gaming channel about the year that was for gaming as well.
Yeah, so, we're only on the edge of July, and we're already like, what a fucking year.
Is it over yet? No, fuck.
Yeah.
Well, it's half over, at least now, finally.
Yeah.
We just have to get through, let's see, July, August, September, October, November, December. 6 more fucking months.
Yeah, we're really only at the half mark.
Yeah. And then, like, 2 months away from the end of the year, there will be new hardware coming out for gamers. And I'm only say that generically here on this podcast. Because that's really content for the other one. So I think that's all we have, right?
Yeah, that's about it for now.
So with all of that said, I'm Drew, that's Desertnord. This is Drew That Podcast number 1. Like I said, next week, we're probably going to wind up talking about the comparison between the fall of the Roman Empire and the current state of the United States of America. Because it makes sense at this point in time.
Yep.
And after that, who knows what may arise to talk about that.
Yeah, we'll find more topics.
Generic, yeah. But I think this went very well, was very educational, and you learned something about something really old.
Yes, really, really old.
The oldest thing known to man at this point.
Yeah, no. Just the oldest relics.
At least it's older than I am. With all that said, everybody, I'm Drew, Desertnord. Don't forget to subscribe to this brand new channel, Drew That, here on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe to the other one if you're a gamer, Drew That Games. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter. That's a joke at this point in time, but on Twitter at That Drew. He's Rod Layers on Twitter. And we'll see you guys hopefully next week at some point, but we'll see what happens.
Yep.
With all of that said, Raylos are weird. Fuck Disney. And we'll see you next time.
And fuck Naughty Dog.
That's the other channel.
Okay.
So yeah, Raylos are weird. Fuck Disney. And Kathleen Kennedy needs to go. We'll see you next time, and may the force be with you. Always.